So this week in the weekend message, we talked about being Jesus-centered. Jesus-centered as people, Jesus-centered as churches. And there's this blog that Alex and I follow by a guy named Kerry Niehoff, and he came out with some really interesting things that really made us think, and we kind of been having a conversation with each other about that all week, and wanted to kind of let you have a look into some of that, a little bit of our conversation. So, Alex, this quote from a famous writer, Alexander Solzhenitsyn, kind of jumped out at you, and I'm going to read that and see if maybe you want to comment on that. He wrote, "If only there were evil people somewhere insidiously committing evil deeds, and it were necessary only to separate them from the rest of us and destroy them. But the line dividing good and evil cuts through the heart of every human being." What's he after with that?
Yeah, I like that quote, in that, there's no people that are just purely evil. We can't classify people as evil because we all sin. The Bible, affirms that truth left, right, and center, saying, we all fall short of the glory of God. My sin complicates the issue just as much as my neighbor, as the person that lives in the next state over, as people that live in another country. We all sin, and we all participate and cause the problem.
You know what that's making me think of is that thing that Jesus said about how easy, take the log out of your own eye before you take it out of someone else's eye. It seems, again, there's so much of this going on today of us like saying, well, that's wrong, that's evil, that's bad, and it might be. But if the other person's seeing that same thing in me, they're just going to go, oh, there's that hypocrite. He's talking about my evil and not his.
I've heard this quote before, and it really sticks with me. But I really believe this, that we should be more concerned with our own sin than with our neighbors.
Yeah.
Another quote that we found in this article, and Pastor, I want to get your thoughts on this, is that God transcends all our political categories, however important they might be to us. Politics matter, but it will never change the world the way the gospel can or has. In light of the current climate and timing right now, coming up on...
Oh, so you're asking me that in election season?
In an election year, yeah. What do you think about that quote?
Well, I think it's really important for us as Christians that our political beliefs, what he's saying is they're important. You've heard me say they're important. I think I said last week that politics as individuals, it's the way we effect change in society. But within the church, you just go back to the New Testament. In the church, there are people all across a political spectrum. In our church, there's people left, right, center, middle, everywhere. And it's like when we throw the idea as if you believe politically different than me, that you're not a Christian, I think we're going into that same dangerous world again of classifying people as evil or wrong, and then what we end up doing is pushing people away from Jesus. And as we say, ultimately, just like laws don't change people, right? Do the speed limit make you drive the speed limit? Right?
Nope.
Politics ultimately isn't going to change hearts, right? Jesus is. And I think that's the point we're making about being Jesus-centered. Yeah, and that, because you're like way younger than I am, this is the one that's stuck out to me about the culture and what we do so we don't lose your generation, and even the generation coming behind you, like some of those young people and young families you're working with. He said this: as a Christian leader, you're not pointing to yourself. You're pointing people to Jesus. If your church is just a reflection of some liberal or conservative ideology, you'll lose the next generation. They're not looking for a reflection of culture. They're looking for an alternative to it. And what I'm wondering is, as a member of the next generation, is that true? That it's like, I'm not looking for ideology, I'm looking for an alternative to what I see.
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree with that. And I can see where he's coming from in this quote, in that, if the church is totally aligned with one culture, that's a human culture, that isn't God's culture, there are going to be things in that don't match up with what we say we believe in how we should act, loving God and loving our neighbors. If we're to just summarize it, if we aren't reflecting what we say we believe, then we come across as hypocrites. And that's something that I know I have a hard time dealing with people that come across that way. I know a lot of people, that I came up with that are a little bit younger than me feel the same way. And so there are good things in all human cultures, and there are things that match up with what we believe as Christians, but no human culture has ever perfectly aligned itself with what we as Christians believe our worldview should be. And so saying that one party's view or one country's view or one subculture's culture perfectly aligns with what the Christian culture should be, they all fall short. And so we should strive more to have our lives align with what Jesus says than with what the TV tells us.
So we don't end up pushing people away from Jesus that we're trying to reach. In fact, it just made me think of something else, and I'm not going to get this quote directly. I didn't write it down, but something else he said made me. It was like something to the effect of, if your theology matches up exactly perfect with your politics, you're probably not worshiping Jesus.
Yeah, absolutely. One last quote that I wanted us to talk about. He's talking about this point in how angry and emotional everybody is, and how
you've heard me talk about that a lot.
Conversations tend to spiral out of control, and so he talked about this idea of sleep on it, pray on it. And I want to hear your response to that.
Yeah, it's taken me a while to learn that, but because my first reaction, I get as angry or as emotional as anybody else, and I hear something somebody says, or I see something somebody posts, and I'm like, oh, that's wrong, and I'm going to correct them. What he said was, just wait 24 hours. Do you have to respond? This is the best practical thing I got out of this short little 4-page blog. It was like, Richard, just wait. Wait 24 hours till you've kind of thought things through, calmed down, prayed through it. Even if you're still end up responding to it, and a lot of times when I end up waiting, I'm like, I don't need to respond. But even if I end up responding, I'm going to respond from a better spot with less emotion, and again, in a way that's going to, again, the whole point is how do you, part of pointing to Jesus and being Jesus-centered, I think, is not pushing people away from Jesus. And we're not talking about people in the club that already know him. It's like, how do you not push people away that already think you're like weird and fringy? Mm-hmm. One of the ways, maybe, I learned I don't have to respond to everything.
Sometimes being quicker to listen rather than quicker to react is a good thing.
I read that at some point. I read, yeah, that's, the Bible's full of stuff like that. And thanks for listening to this kind of extended talk on Jesus Center today. It is a really good thought-provoking article. I would encourage you to go back and read it. It's not going to take you more than 5 minutes. Go ahead and click on the video, the link in the video description here, and it'll lead you right to that article. Thanks for tuning in on our little conversation.